right, everybody, we're back again for dispositions. For those of you, dispositions is basically the sale of whatever asset that you've got under contract or the contract itself. When I initially got started in the business, wholesaling wise, it was around 2012. I'd done rehabs for about 3 or 4 years prior to that. Started wholesaling around 2012. And the motto at that time for me was, let's get the contract, I'll find a buyer. If I've got the right contract, finding a buyer is easy. And I maintained that for quite a while. But as the market started shifting from a buyer's market to a seller's market, that's when I really started realizing that one of the biggest strengths in your wholesaling business is your buyer's list. Now, solid 2012 through 2015, I had a core set of a few buyers that got a big majority of my properties. But as the market started shifting into a seller's market, those same buyers were not willing to purchase at the numbers that the seller's market was creating. So I had to start shifting. And what I saw, a lot of the, a lot of the experienced wholesalers in my area that have been in this business for a considerable amount of time through a few market cycles, where I started seeing them win the most was whenever the market became shifting to a seller's market. They were able to leverage their buyers list as co-wholesalers because the deal volume was getting smaller. They were still able to produce and move a lot of contracts, but they were doing it through the strength of their buyers list and co-wholesaling. So we'll talk about co-wholesaling towards the end of this series, but I believe that co-wholesaling is a very, very important part to keeping you active in this business through separate market cycles. And I'll also talk about some market cycles at the very end of this video series because I think it plays an important role in your business and your trajectory in this business. I've said it more than once and I believe it to be 100% true. You should not box yourself into being a wholesaler. You should really learn real estate investing as a whole and apply wholesaling when it makes sense for the deal, but you should be trying to maximize every deal that you get so that way you can maintain your position in this business longer. If you're constantly, letting good deals go away because you're stuck in that wholesaler box, you're going to find yourself struggling to build the capital that you want to retire from. That's my 2 cents, but moving into this dispositions class, I've got several different ways that you can move a property, and I want to hit all of them in this one video series. So if you end up with questions, tag them in the comments below, and I'll make sure that I come back and answer them for you. So one of the biggest things that we're going to talk about a lot is my clicky thing not working. Did I turn it off? I turned it off. There we go. All right, assignments of contract. Let me think about this for the simplest form that I can possibly think of. Assignments of contract is one way of getting this property moved. I go to a seller, and I'm sitting down at the seller's house, and I get a contract for the sale of that home from the seller. It's my contract. I have the contract. My name is on it. That contract has value, and that's what I need to make sure you understand, that when we are doing assignments of contract, we are not selling houses. We are selling contracts. I have equitable interest in that property and this contract. And through my equitable interest in this contract, I can sell my interest in that contract to someone else. Now, let me say that again slower and just straightforward. I have a contract with a seller to purchase the house. That contract gives me the right to purchase that home. I can sell my right to purchase that home to someone else. That is as simple as I can possibly make it. Assignments of contract is the sale of contracts. Okay? So how does that work for me? I find a seller willing to sell their house for $70,000. I contract, I retain the right to purchase their home for $70,000. I then find another real estate investor that is willing to pay $75,000 for that house. I have it under contract for $70,000. I then sell that contract to the buyer for $5,000, therefore creating the $75,000 that person was willing to pay. I have it under contract for $70,000. They're willing to pay $75,000. They buy the contract from me for $75,000. That's how an assignment of contract works. Now, there's some caveats to it and some things that we need to discuss, and there will be more discussions on that towards the end as far as some of the things that you need in that contract. But in the simplest of forms, that is what an assignment of contract is. Now, that is one way of closing this transaction. Another way to close this transaction, what we are going to call a double close. Some people call them different things. Some people call them ABBC transactions, and I'll discuss more about that in a moment. But a double close is an alternate way of creating the same scenario, and I'll discuss a little bit more about why we would use one over the other here in a second. Okay, so what is a double close? We're going to rewind back, and we're going to use a similar scenario. I'm sitting down with the seller, and I get that property under contract for $70,000. Okay? I then find a buyer that is willing to pay $75,000 for the house. In our previous discussion on assignments of contract, I would assign my contract to that buyer. A double close is going to be a slightly bit different. I will contract with the seller for $70,000 to purchase it, and I will do a purchase and sale agreement with my buyer for the same piece of real estate with added disclosures stating, I may not be in title right now, but I am in contract to get title. And I don't want to confuse you there. Maybe I'll slow down and I'll just try and hit this in its simplest of forms. Contract with seller to purchase for $70,000. I will then contract to sell the house, not an assignment of contract. It's different. Assignment of contract is I sell the contract. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to contract to sell the home to this buyer. How am I going to pull that off? I'll explain more about that here in just a second. Over here, what I'll do is I'll schedule these people to close on July 1st. Okay? I'll schedule them to close on July 1st, and I'll get my buyer to also schedule to close on July 1st. And what's going to happen on July 1st is on July 1st, I will buy the house from the seller. I take title to it. It is my house. I now own it. And the very second that I own it, I turn around and immediately resell it to the buyer. That's why we call it a double close. We have two closings, closings with the seller and a closing with the buyer. I take title to the home and then resell it. That is a double close. Now, some people call it an ABBC. Why do they call it an ABBC? The seller is A to B, B to C. ABBC transaction. All right, that is a double close. Now, there are a lot of things that we need to think of when we are double closing and assigning contracts. Why would I choose one over the other? Why would I choose to assign versus double? Okay, let me run through a few thoughts there. With an assignment of contract, one of the things that we can do with an assignment of contract is keep the seller from directly understanding how much money we made. If I go to Walmart or I go to Target or I go to Home Depot and I purchase something from one of those stores, when I get my receipt, does my receipt say how much profit Home Depot made on that sale? It absolutely does not. Well, with an assignment of contract, we can use what's called blind HUDs. And I'll put some examples of blind HUDs below, and I'll even pop a few up right here. But with a blind HUD, what we are going to do is I'm going to have on the HUD a left side of the transaction, which is my buyer's side, and I'll have the right side of the transaction on the HUD, which is the seller's side of the transaction. What a blind HUD does is it has a separate HUD for the buyer and a separate HUD for the seller, where the seller and buyer can only see their side of the transaction. The other side of the HUD is left blank. Well, when we do that, who pays the assignment fee? Who pays the assignment fee? The buyer pays my assignment fee. So my assignment fee will be on the buyer's side of that HUD. When the seller looks at the transaction, the seller will see all of the information that is important to them, such as the sales price and the net cash at close. How much money are they making and how much was the contract price? What fees are they having to pay? All of that will be visible to them, but they will not see into the buyer's information. So the only one that knows how much money I made on this transaction is the buyer. Now, why would I use the assignment of contract? A, it will prevent the seller, if I use a blind HUD, and you need to make sure your title company / title attorney is using blind HUDs. If I do that, then the seller does not know how much money I made, but the buyer will. Okay, now if I have a solid buyer in my pipeline, and we'll talk more about this, but if I have a solid buyer in my pipeline, guess what? They're not going to care how much money I made. And by doing an assignment of contract, I can save a lot of the additional fees and potential liability in a double close. What do I mean by liability in a double close? In a double close, like I said just a moment ago, I actually take title to the property. And once I have become a part of the chain of title, I may have additional risks and liabilities that are attached to that. Above and beyond just those additional potential liabilities, I also will be incurring potential additional fees. Transactional funding, how am I going to get this funded? That might be something that's brought up. And I'll talk more about that because I'm going to go in depth on assignments and double closes here towards the end of this video. I'm trying to clarify right now some of the differences between the two. But with that double close, I actually take title and I incur potential additional fees. And with those two things combined, I would much rather assign than ever double close. But here are some reasons why I definitely would want to double close. Let's say I'm not making $5,000 on this assignment contract. I'm making $500,000 on that assignment contract. Now that sounds like I just blew your mind out of the water, like $500,000 on an assignment contract. Is that even possible? Yes, it absolutely is possible. It's rare and it deals more predominantly with commercial property, but assignments of contract hitting that range is not unlikely. I've seen one recently for $400,000, and I've personally done one for $300,000. So they do get way up there. That is a good time to start double closing. Now, would you want to double close if you're making $15,000? These are going to be personal decisions that you need to be aware of. I would double close for my side anything over about 15 grand. That was me though. You might say, you know what, I'm not going to double close anything unless it's more than 20. Or I'm not going to double close anything unless it's more than 8. I don't care what your number is, but you're going to need to kind of start figuring out and feeling out how comfortable you are with disclosing the amount of money you are making on this contract to your buyer, because despite how much of a relationship you may have with that buyer, that buyer may freak out. It's just the honest truth. That buyer may freak out. So double close is a way for you to prevent that. Okay? Now, let's talk about the instance where you do have a deal where you're making a solid chunk of change, 30 grand, 50 grand, 100 grand, 500 grand. You're making a good amount of money. The best thing that I could possibly tell you, and I strongly recommend that, especially as a newer investor, that you double check your numbers before you do this, because you don't want to take down a deal that you think is a deal. You need to know for a fact that it is a deal. But if you've got a solid deal under your belt and you're like, wow, there's a $70,000 profit on that deal right there, and I'm picking it up for a steal because this seller is absolutely done with it. They want it gone, and they don't care if they take a loss to get it gone. They're done. Guess what? I would, beyond all advice, give you straight up, take the deal down. Do not market it for sale. Do not waste any time. Do not waste anything. Get the property purchased. That will prevent you from so much headache and potential loss by having other unscrupulous investors trying to skirt your deal. And what do I mean by that? They go behind your back and try to contract with the seller regardless of their knowledge of you being in contract with them. It happens. Well, you get a really solid deal in play, take the deal down. Now, if you're new and you're like, man, I don't have the money to take this down, I can't do this, I can't do that. That's where I said in the very beginning of this video series about immersion. You need to immerse yourself into your local community of real estate investors. And if you've done that well, you should have a very good indication of who are the players in this industry that you might be able to partner up with to get that deal taken down. It would be much better to give up a small piece of the pie by working with a newer, more experienced investor to get the deal taken down, listed on the MLS, and get it sold at the top dollar that you possibly can, and give them a portion of that fee versus taking the risk of being able to sell it on your own and or somebody circumventing your contract and going straight to the seller and getting it closed before you do. So if you do get a solid deal on the table, look at possibly partnering up with someone, B, securing your own transactional funding. Transactional funding is whenever I find a lender, you can find these often through hard money lenders, where they will loan you the money for a 24 to 72 hour period with a 1%. I don't know what you're going to charge across the nation, but most of the ones I'm working with are averaging about a 1% fee for the cost of that money. So if they let you borrow 100 grand for 72 hours, you have to pay them $1,000. That's the transactional funding. But in this instance, if we're planning on taking it down and we're trying to take it for the long run, we cannot use transactional funding. Transactional funding should be used for a double close. I got kind of off my path there. Transactional funding is used for a double close. In this instance, we're going to have to literally take it down. That means either the use of bank funds, private funds, or a hard money lender. You're going to need to find somebody else that can pull that off for you. But if you do this, it's going to be the best way to maximize your dollar, and I suggest you do it all day long. Okay? Now, we've talked about some of the ways you can dispose of it. We've talked about taking it down yourself, double closes, and assignments of contract. Now let's talk about building a buyer's list, because this is where you're going to be able to maximize every deal that you have by knowing that you have solid buyers that are looking for X types of contracts. Okay? Now here's some tips for building a buyer's list. Let's go ahead and put these up on the screen real quick. Coming through here, Facebook form search is a way to get yourself started. If you are looking at your Facebook groups and you have some very solid active groups in your marketplace, and you just go in there and you search that group for @gmail.com, you will now find tons and tons and tons of people putting their email address out publicly so that the way they can be notified when deals are hitting the market. Have a VA and or yourself just sit there and go through each and every one of those posts and collect as many email addresses as you possibly can and organize them into some form of a spreadsheet. Okay? That is step number one. Just doing that right off the bat should easily, in a larger market, be able to collect you anywhere between 300 to 1,000 emails inside of a 24 to 48 hour period. And those are people that are all actively looking and have posted recently looking to purchase real estate in your area. Now, are all of those people going to be solid buyers? No. A good chunk of them will likely be newer people and or other wholesalers trying to stay in the loop of what's going on in the market. But you will find some solid buyers throughout. You will also find some solid con artists, whatever you want to call it. I hate I hate having to be honest with you, because that's the only way I'm going to really help you out. There are a lot of people in this business that should not be in this business. They're just not doing things ethically. And with that to be said, it causes a lot of problem within our industry. But you're going to have to build this buyer's list, and you're going to have to learn how to weed out the ones that are not going to perform. And I'll talk more about qualifying your buyers as we move forward. But other ways that we can do this: attend all real estate investor associations. If you can sponsor that real estate investor association, that's even better. Getting access to these people that are constantly out there immersing themselves into this market and finding them, it's going to double up and give you 2 opportunities at once. Many more opportunities than just 2. But if I go to every single REIA, I can now find solid buyers. That's 1. I could possibly find other wholesalers that I could partner with and co-wholesale. I could find potential lenders. I could find potential contractors. I could find a lot of people that I want in my network by attending these. But if you're looking to build a buyer's list and you're in an active marketplace, I don't know what the rest of the country's like, but in DFW, there's probably 2 to 3 real estate investor meetups a night. So if you spend 5 to 6 nights a week attending at least one REIA, then by the end of the week, you should at least have 30, 50 to 100 new emails every single week. It's not that hard to do. Okay, another way that you might be able to build a buyer's list, and I think this is a good one. This is one of the ones that I used starting out, is there was a website called GoSection8.com. I haven't verified if this still works, but on GoSection8.com, I can look in a city or a zip code for all Section 8 rentals available for rent at that time. And on the right-hand bar, I could message the seller directly. And what I would do is I'd put in a message and I'd say, "Hi, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, I am looking to purchase, hi, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, are you looking to purchase any more Section 8 rentals in your area? If so, please reach out to me. I am continuously marketing for acquisitions, and in the event that I come across the property that you might be interested in, I would gladly assign the contract to you. Now, in the event that you are not looking to purchase any more rentals and you might be interested in selling some of your portfolio, I also buy houses, so please let me know. It's a way to kind of double dip. A, hit them up and find out if they would be willing to buy more property from you, and at the same time, maybe they're a Section 8 rental and they're tired of doing it and they might be willing to sell you. So it's a way that you can also work acquisitions and dispositions at the exact same time. Go to the local Section 8 office. They should have a list of all properties on Section 8, and you can start marketing to those people directly. For rent ads, if they are landlords being some of the buyers that will likely pay you more than your rehabbers, so trying to get a solid list of rental buyers is good for you. But I start looking at all the for rent ads and I start calling them. And I just say, hey, I know that the property is currently for rent, but are you interested in buying any more rentals? I have often opportunities that hit my table of solid rental properties that would fit your neighborhood. Would you be interested in buying more? If they say, yeah, figure out what criteria they're looking for. So now you can figure out while you're out hitting up acquisitions, okay, I remember Susie likes to buy in 76112. And when she buys in 76112, she's willing to buy at 86 cents on the dollar. Well, if I know she's willing to buy at 86 cents on the dollar and I've got a seller who keeps pushing me for XYZ price, well, if that still fits the 86-cent model, I can now offer much more than I would have if I was constantly trying to hit at 70 cents. Okay, so the for rent ads are really good for you. Title companies. Solid investor title companies know what investors are closing with them regularly. It's important to network with escrow officers, escrow agents, and title agents, so that way you can start finding out who some of these solid, bigger players are in your marketplace. You know, I know that XYZ has closed on 19 properties in the last 2 months with me. Well, that might be a good introduction that title company could make for you, because if you are selling to that person and that person closes with them, then they get to sell more title policies. It's a win-win for them. Okay? Cashbuyersplus.com is another resource that you might be able to tap into to get your buyers list beefed up. And then one of the things that I was completely unaware of for the first 4 to 5 years that I was in this business was list swapping. This is a way to really rapidly build your buyers list, and I've put that on here at the end. But if I go through and I do all of these first 7 or 8 that I mentioned, and then I go out, and let's say by the time I hit those first 7 to 8 over the course of a month or two, I've got 2,000 emails. I will reach out to other wholesalers in my marketplace and I said, hey, if I give you 2,000 emails, will you give me 2,000 emails? And a lot of the times these larger wholesalers are accustomed to doing these list swaps, and they'll be like, yeah, you give me 2,000, I'll give you 2,000. Well, now you got 4,000. And then you hit up another wholesaler and be like, hey, if I give you 4,000, will you give me 4,000? Boom, boom. Now you got 8,000. And before you know it, you're now hitting 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 emails inside of a short period of time. There's a lot of ways that you can build your buyers list. Those are just a small few of the ones that I would hit you up on. I did talk about title companies. Something else that you could easily throw in on top of that would be hard money lenders. If they are lending to real estate investors, they know who are buying. Boom, connect those 2 dots and you now have buyers lists. So if you're just now starting out and you're nervous about being able to move your properties, here's a list of resources to help stabilize your property, stabilize your buyers list. Okay? Going through, give me just a second. Going through, let me see here, trying to catch my train of thought. All right, marketing for sale. I've got all those properties built up. I've got, thousands and thousands of potential buyers. Email blasting a buyers list is something that you most definitely can do. I would try to hit up my most solid buyers first and give them kind of the initial go, because once you email blast it out, the cat's out of the bag. Am I saying don't do it? Absolutely not. I'm just saying hold off on the email blast until you've contacted some of your your best performing buyers first, because that keeps you kind of in control. Once you email blast it out, everybody and their mom knows that it's out there, and then you kind of opened yourself up to some additional security risks that you might need to take into consideration. But how am I going to market this for sale? My buyers list is a solid resource to start with. I can start calling up the buyers that I'm aware of, but if I'm not getting anybody to bite on it, here's a couple of little hacks that I might be able to help you put together to figure out the disposition side of this. Tax records. Let's go ahead and pull this list up on the screen. Tax records. I will draw a like 1 to 5 mile radius around my subject property, and I'm going to find all absentee owners that own real estate within a 5 mile radius of my subject property. Now that I know all of the landlords that own in that area, I will market to each and every one of them either through a skip trace and a cold call or direct mail. I would initially start out skip tracing and cold calling them, and I just call them up and say, hey, I understand that you own 123 Main Street that's about 2 or 3 miles away from this property that I've got. Would you be interested in buying it if the numbers met your criteria? All right, well, you're going to figure out one of two things. A, yeah, I'd love to buy more property over there. Or B, I have no desire to own more property over there and I'm tired of dealing with real estate. Well, then that opens you up to the lead on of, well, if you're tired of dealing with real estate, would you consider selling me your properties? So it's a double whammy there. Acquisitions, dispositions at the exact same time. Another thing you can do is bandit signs. Okay, take, and find 50, 60 bandit signs. The weekend that you get the property listed, or the day you get it listed, you can start dropping a few out. But the weekend, go out there and just blanket all of the areas around your subject property where heavy traffic is coming and going. And drop a sign saying something like, investment property worth, $200,000, as is $120,000. Call now, and then drop your phone number on there. You're going to get a lot of people that are going to start calling you up off of that, and if nothing else, you can at least add them to your buyers list. But if they do show interest, schedule a showing with them. Okay, Facebook forums. This is kind of one of those additional things that kind of lets the cat out of the bag. You're kind of hitting a much broader targeted, or a less targeted audience, and more of a shotgun approach. But if you go into those same forums that are heavily active, I keep calling them forums, damn, I'm old. Go into those Facebook groups and you start posting and advertising your deal for sale in there, you're going to get a lot of eyeballs on there that may or may not be on your buyer's list. But you got to protect yourself. Maybe not disclose the address to the property, just disclose the zip code, the core information about the property and the numbers, and then put your phone number on there so that way you can start having some phone interviews with these people. And you've kind of got to weigh out the scales. Can I be ultra protective of the property and not give out any information at all and then just like run everybody through a rigorous screening process? Yes, you can do that. It might limit the number of people willing to buy from you, but you get somebody on the phone just be like, hey, have you ever bought any property before? Yes or no? All right, would you mind just shooting me over a HUD real quick, because I've got a really solid deal here, and I've had issues in the past of people trying to circumvent my thing. I don't know you. All I'm trying to do is just verify that you are a real buyer, and if you're a real buyer, shoot me over a HUD real quick, and then I'll release the address to you. If they're a solid buyer, I'm struggling to imagine that they would not be willing to disclose a HUD to you, especially if you give them the reason why. Throw that because in there. There's a book out there called Persuasion. I forget the rest of it, but it's Persuasion. You read that book, and one of the tips to persuading people was a study performed by some fancy college that said just using the word because, even if you don't legitimately give them a solid reason why, just the word because increases the probability of you being able to convert that person over to what you want just by using it. So I would approach that person and say, hey man, because of the problems I've had in the past of people trying to go around my contracts, would you please send me over just at least one recent HUD so that way I can verify that you have been buying properties? Boom, you get that over, send them over an address, and that will open that deal up a little bit for you. But Facebook is one of those things. Craigslist, throw it out there on Craigslist. Different buyers focus out in different groups. Craigslist might be some of the older investors. Facebook might be some of the younger investors. Just kind of throwing it out there. The more places that you can advertise your property for sale, the better the chances are of you getting that property sold will be. Section 8, go through, find all your Section 8 landlords. Like I said, over there you can go to the Section 8 office, and a lot of times there you'll be able to get a list of all of the Section 8 properties. Find those landlords, market to them. Text your buyers list, email your buyers list. If you can make some solid contacts with hedge funds, figure out what their buying criteria is, talk to your hedge funds. iBuyers, I don't have any experience with iBuyers whatsoever yet, but they are becoming very prominent in the market. What I mean by iBuyers, your Zillow, your OfferPads, those types of things, your Open Door. If you're looking at, maximizing some of your dollar, get with them and find out what their buying criteria is and see if you can find a way to do deals with them. Hard money lenders, should have access to a ton of buyers, and by going to them, they're going to refer you to people that they know will close because they want to collect the fee from the loan. Real estate agents, you find the right real estate agents in a market that have a solid buyers list of their own, you can work with them. You know, some of the things you might tell some of these people, like a hard money lender is probably not going to charge you anything for bringing a buyer to the table. Everything else are buyers that you have secured on your own. Well, if I'm working with a real estate agent, that real estate agent's going to want to be paid in this transaction somehow, so you're going to need to decide how that agent will be paid. What I see a lot of wholesalers do is they'll say, just add your real estate fee on top of my price. So if I'm marketing this deal for $80,000 and you want $3,000, well then you need to market it for $83,000 as an agent to your buyers, and then that puts their fee on top of it. Alternatively, you can say, you know what, I'll pay the $3,000. If you can get it moved at $80,000, I'll give you $3,000 as part of the deal. You need to figure out what that is up front because that agent's going to want to be paid for bringing the right buyer. Another one is going to be title companies, very similar to hard money lenders. They will introduce you to the right buyer if they feel like they can make something happen because they'll get the title policy out of the transaction. One of the last things to think of and look forward to here on the marketing aspect of it is, wow, I just drew a complete and total blank. If it comes back to me, I'll touch base on it again here in a second. But let's move forward, and I'm going to talk about a totally different kind of buyer. I know we're getting a little lengthy into this section, and I may actually have to break this down into two sections. I probably will because we are going on close to 45 minutes probably of this particular series. Let me touch base on this one before we stop, okay? Owner-occupied buyers. Owner-occupied buyers. I got introduced to this midways into my wholesaling, and I really saw the power of it whenever I knocked down my first deal. When I knocked down my first deal doing it like this. Prior to this, I was trying to acquire all of my properties at an investor grade price point. Well, once I learned that I had an alternative exit strategy at a lower price point home that was cash buyers for their homestead. These are people that are buying the house not to invest in a traditional fashion. They're looking to buy this house because they want to own it and live in it. They are often willing to pay considerably more than a traditional real estate investor. Okay? Now, I found this to work predominantly in lower price point homes. Homes where the average, not the average person, but homes where the price point was under about $70,000. That's DFW. Now, if you live differently, or if you live in a different part of the country, you might have to do some experimenting and figure out what this is going on. But what we have here in DFW, and is probably likely across the United States, is there's going to be a demographic within your area of people that are traditionally very frugal with their money. They don't spend a lot and they save it. They save every bit of money that they make. Now, you're going to find out that these people may have $30,000, $50,000, $70,000 saved up underneath their mattress. And they're saving it for one reason and one reason only. They want to buy a house and they don't want to finance that house. So they'll save it up and they'll go out and purchase this property cash. Okay, if I can find a home in a neighborhood that they want to live in and that they can afford to purchase with the cash that they have saved up, they are almost across the board willing to pay more than your traditional real estate investor, because they know that when they purchase that home, that they themselves are going to be the people doing the remodel. Whereas an investor is thinking, well, I'm going to have to hire a general contractor and it's going to take me $45,000 to fix up that house. This type of buyer will often look at the home and say, you know what? I can probably get this property completely fixed up, just me and my family, for probably less than $10,000 in material, and I can have a really beautiful home in a neighborhood that I want to live in, and I can own it cash and it'll be my home. When I found out that that lower price point home could be sold in this fashion, I truly changed the trajectory of a lot of my lower dollar acquisitions. I was able to offer more because I was no longer targeting a real estate investor, and I was still able to maximize the deal by finding the right owner-occupied buyer. Now, how would I do that? My disposition strategy on this would be predominantly bandit signs, and I would write them in multiple different languages. A lot of the immigrants coming in from other country, and I'm not saying anything other than just straight up business here, they are very frugal with their money. The economies that they come from and the social environments that they are raised in are different than the American culture. So these immigrants are very frugal and save their money like none other. So if you have any immigrant population that's dense within your community, marketing with multiple different languages so that way those people can see that you have a property available for a discount that they might be able to purchase cash owner to owner is going to be a huge win for you in your disposition marketing. All right, this is not the end of the dispositions class, but I am going to take a break on this because I'm realizing that this particular class is going on and on and on. So I'm going to hit a break on it, and I'm going to pop right back in for the second half of this class right after this.